Good morning, everybody, and thank you for having me back. It's great to be with you, and it's a great honor to be here celebrating the opportunity for a future-free Iran. Mr. Vice President, I think everybody was obviously very encouraged and enthused by your remarks. I think we have about 20 minutes, so if I can just dive into a few pieces of that to expand on a little bit further, let us do that.
You bet.
You mentioned House Resolution 100. In this current Congress, Congressman Tom McClintock has authored and now has 224 co-signers to his resolution that cites the 10-point plan of President-elect Maryam Rajavi for the future of Iran. What is the significance of laying out a vision for a pro-freedom future Iran?
Well, first, Marc Short and I have worked together for more than a decade. He is a champion for freedom in his own right, and I'm very proud. Thanks. I also want to say, looking at this rather intimidating front row of diverse bipartisan leaders, would you give all of them a round of applause? I know you're here. Ambassador, the General, Congressman, good to see you. Very impressive. I think the importance of the 10-point plan is that what I believe is evidence in that the growing support for the resolution in the Congress is it gives a structure to a vision for Iran post-dictatorship by the Ayatollahs or its past. And it says here is a vision that reflects much of the Jeffersonian vision at the American founding that I think makes it possible. And this is a tribute to the Iranian American community and the progress that you've made. For the American people to see clearly the separation between the tyrants in Tehran and the Iranian people. The 10-point plan proves that the Iranian people want to enter the family of nations and recognize the God-given liberties that are at the foundation of freedom. And I commend Mrs. Rajavi and I commend this organization for sharing that vision. In my conversation with Mrs. Rajavi earlier today, we spoke about the fact that before 1979, when the Ayatollah went to Paris, he spoke in vague terms about what the future would look like. And when the Shah fell and they came in, the world was horrified at what took over this great nation. And I believe the 10-point plan gives evidence of the fact that this movement is different than any movement in the past. And it's a movement that's grounded in democratic principles and a commitment to stability and peace. And that's why I think the 10-point plan, the affirmation of that in the congressional resolution, the widening support and awareness across the United States of America is great hope for the future, and it's going to continue to embolden this administration, I hope, and future administrations to stand with the freedom-loving people of Iran, here and around the world.
In your remarks, you also discussed the Trump-Pence administration's decision to withdraw from JCPOA. I recall as a staffer, there were a lot of calls coming into you and to the president from European leaders, members of Congress, many within the State Department, imploring you and begging the administration to stay in the JCPOA. Can you share with the audience a little bit of what that pressure campaign was like and why it was important to take that stand?
Well, I think to say that virtually every relevant leader in the world was opposed to us doing that would be an understatement. I mean, I was there for many of those calls when President Trump was again urged to remain in the deal. And candidly, it wasn't just foreign leaders. Many in the diplomatic corps in the United States echoed the same. felt that we ought to stay in the JCPOA, but I give President Trump credit for keeping his word. We told the American people we would get out of the disastrous Iranian nuclear deal, and we did. And I think that decision in and of itself set us on a different path with regard to Iran in the region. And as I said, the day we left office, now more than 2 years ago, Iran was more isolated than ever before. But to say that there was overwhelming opposition to stepping out of that deal would be accurate. But America proved that when you lead for freedom, that the world responds, and the world, and particularly that part of the world, changed during our season of service because of it.
Trump, Pence, 24.
As this current administration continues to look at ways to re-enter the JCPOA, there are a lot of other events that are now happening on the world stage, from a Russian invasion into Ukraine, a continuing growing threat from China. To what extent is Iran able to capitalize on the world's attention being elsewhere, whether or not it's the recent stories we've read about school children being poisoned in Iran, or whether or not it's the continued pursuit of a nuclear program? How are they able to take advantage of the world's attention being elsewhere, and what responsibility does the current administration have to make sure that the world stays concerned about the growing threat in Iran?
Well, I hope it is a clarion call to everyone here and everyone looking on. That as war rages in Eastern Europe, as China continues its provocations in the Asia Pacific, we cannot let the world forget that the greatest source of terrorism in the world is Iran and the mullahs. And I truly do believe that it's incumbent upon all of us. It's part of what brings me here today, to do everything that we can to continue to put daylight. If there was only one message that broke through, and whether it's to all of you gathered here, many prominent Iranian American citizens, whether it's friends looking on from Ashraf 3 or elsewhere in the world, is that do not be discouraged by changing American administrations, because the American people's commitment to freedom does not change. And I want to assure you, as I travel all across this country as a private citizen now, that this is a freedom-loving nation, and that we will once again and soon have leadership in Washington, D.C. that understands and gives voice to the cause of freedom in Iran, in Eastern Europe, and around the world without ambiguity. So I want you to be encouraged. I want you to be encouraged that the changes that are happening in the world, that commitment to freedom is still there in the hearts of the American people. But to Marc's point, now is the time to redouble your efforts. I mean, the atrocity of the poisoning of girls in schools around Iran, the other atrocities, the jailing of thousands by the regime, the attempt to suppress a movement that continues to break out across Iran, is a story that needs to be told. And that's why I want to commend all those gathered here, and I want to be very clear, because I'm a Republican and proud of it, but I am proud of the Republicans and Democrats that co-sponsored that resolution. Now's the time for America to be heard. in support of a free and democratic world.
There were many policies in the Trump-Pence administration that changed the course of American discourse or policy toward Iran, whether or not it was getting out of JCPOA, whether or not it was significant sanctions. But perhaps none would send a more clarion signal than the elimination of General Qasem Soleimani, who many estimate was responsible personally for the death of 500 plus American men and women on the battlefields. Although there's some parts of this that we're not in the Situation Room today, but what parts can you share with this audience about that deliberation and why it was important that when he entered the battlefield in Iraq, the administration made a quick decision that we had an opportunity and you wanted to execute on it?
Well, I could say early on in the administration, the president gave our intelligence community the directive to find Qasem Soleimani. I mean, I've stood at the gravesite in Indiana of servicemen whose lives were lost to IEDs that were manufactured by the Quds Force and by Soleimani. And so this was an ongoing effort in our administration. And as we unleashed the American military that took down the ISIS caliphate and took down their leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the search, I know, for Qasem Soleimani never relented. We received word toward the end of the year that there may be an effort by Soleimani to travel by way of one other country into Iraq to, in effect, stand with those that were menacing against the American embassy in Baghdad. We received what we call actionable intelligence about his whereabouts. The president tasked me with pulling together the national security team for regular conversations, first in the Situation Room, and then when we were spread out across the country over the holidays, we spoke several times a day with updates with intelligence and defense, and then briefed the president on what the latest situation was. But I will tell you, as I write in my book, from time to time, President Trump and I had differences of opinion. But I am truly grateful that in that moment, President Donald Trump did not hesitate. When we saw where he was, we saw where the plane was landing, he gave the order and we took him out. And I'll always be grateful. And the world's better for it.
It's been argued, and I would certainly make this point, that the maximum pressure campaign, the decisive decision to take out Qasem Soleimani, paved the way for the Abraham Accords.
I believe it did.
Can you help share a little bit more on that, and also what lessons are for future administrations about how often the policy of strength generates the peace that we all seek?
Well, I believe. I believe not only did the action against Qasem Soleimani, unleashing the armed forces of the United States against ISIS, but also sending an unambiguous message that America stands with Israel. And we moved the American embassy to Jerusalem, the capital of Israel. All sent a clear message across that region of the world that America would keep its word, would stand with its friends without apology. In the Bible that I try and read every day, it says, if the trumpet does not sound a clear call, who will know to get ready for battle? And for too long, for decades, America, particularly with regard to Israel, had sent mixed messages that I think emboldened darker forces in the region to menace against Israel, to sow violence in the region. When we sent a clear and unambiguous message that we would confront terrorism, we would confront terrorists, we would stand with our allies, I believe that clear call set the stage for the first peace agreement in the wider Arab world between Israel and Arab countries in 25 years. But the Abraham Accords is only the beginning. If America continues to stand strong with our allies in the region, I believe history someday will record that the Abraham Accords was when peace began across the Middle East and the Arab world. But we need to be not only its author, but its finisher, and see to it with freedom-loving countries, including, I pray God, Iran someday as well.
Nasser tells me we have time for about 2 more questions. So let me ask, you mentioned this movement here and also the reality that the mullahs and the theocracy do not want the people to believe there is an alternative. For despotic regimes, why is it important for them to suppress the notion that there is an alternative that provides the people a chance for freedom?
Well, there's an old saying that you go with the devil you know. And it's human nature, isn't it? Stay with the familiar. And make no mistake about it. It's what Mrs. Rajavi. It's why she stirs such fear in Tehran. It's why they don't want the world to know about the 10-point plan, the alternative. Because for the people across the world to understand the inspiring vision of Mrs. Rajavi and the 10-point plan represents, I think, the greatest threat to the regime in the long term. I mean, to know that there are Iranian people in Iran, around the world, in the Iranian diaspora here in the United States, Albania at Ashraf III, and elsewhere, who are committed to the freedoms that we inscribed in our Bill of Rights. The idea that, and when I talked to Mrs. Rajavi today, of course, the first thing we talked about is I had 2 granddaughters in the last month. Karen and I have become grandparents 3 times over since I left the White House. And I must tell you, it's had a profound impact on me. I think about challenges facing this country. Our security, our national debt. When I think about the world I want my granddaughters to come of age in, I feel an even greater burden, Mark, about I want those 3 little girls, one of whom could be President of the United States. I want those 3 little girls to come of age in a world when they look at Iran and they see a free and democratic people. They see a people who in their lifetime struggled and won freedom just as we did in 1776. That's what I want them to see. I don't want them to live in a world where the greatest source of terrorism in the world is prospering and being allowed to tyrannize its own people and export violence to the world. I want a better world for them. And I guess that's my stepping off point, Mark, because I I know you have one more question, but I just think there's in that Bible I read, there's another verse I love. Do not grow weary in well-doing, for in due time you will reap a harvest if you do not give up. If you ever grow weary in this, and people in this room and people looking on never do, if you ever think of it, think of the little ones, think of the world we owe them, and think of what we've built in America on the same principles that you want to see put into practice in Iran, and know that we can build a better future for the people of Iran and the world if we stand firm.
We love you, Mike Pence.
Mr. Vice President, for your stands for freedom in Congress and as well as in your role in the administration, you certainly have received your own personal security threats from the Ayatollahs and from the mullahs in Iran. Yet you continue to address this audience. You've addressed it many times. You've addressed audiences in Albania to continue to advance the cause of freedom. And you've encouraged this audience of what else they can do. And perhaps the message is somewhat similar, but we know from your previous speeches that they are received today by the people in Iran via the new technology, that they end up seeing it. What message do you have for those for whom this message gets behind those walls in Iran? For the people watching at home today in Iran, to your words, what message can you give to them before we close out today?
Be confident and be hopeful. I truly do believe that when we make freedom our cause, we make his cause on this earth our own. And so you do not fight alone. And if you will just have faith, if you will have courage, if you will stand firm, you'll see a victory for freedom in Iran. And the American people will be there. So help us God.
Ladies and gentlemen, Vice President Mike Pence.